In today's show, yesterday's price is not today's price. Somebody's buying the Phoenix Suns for close to $4 billion. That means if you want to buy the Portland Trailblazers, it just got a lot more expensive. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making the show your first listen every day. Free on all platforms, 5 days a week. Make it part of your daily routine and make it your first listen every day. As Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, the Phoenix Suns and along with the Phoenix Mercury selling for close to $4 billion. That's going to impact a potential sale of the Blazers whenever that might be. We'll talk about that latest news today. Rylan Stiles over from the Locked On Thunder podcast is going to join the program to talk about what it was like to be in the building yesterday when Damian Lillard set the Blazers all-time scoring record, and a little bit of look ahead to Wednesday's rematch against the Oklahoma City Thunder as the Blazers try to bounce back from a loss on Monday night. And then we'll close the show with Western Conference tiers, first of the season, ranking all 5 teams in the Western Conference from worst to first. Well, really from worst tier to best tier. But let's start with the news. First reported by Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN and confirmed by multiple parties. The Phoenix Suns, who were, forced to be sold by Robert Sarver due to a tumultuous ownership where he created a toxic workplace environment with misogyny and sexual harassment and all types of bad stuff. Basically, he was forced out by the advertising folks, by PayPal, and the Suns were going to be sold as a matter of when. Well, when is today, according to ESPN. This sale is going to go through soon, and the new owner will be Matt Ishbia. Who's that? Well, he is a mortgage lending billionaire, a dude who's made his money on mortgages. He's also a former walk-on at Michigan State University who was part of that 2000 championship team, along with, if you're old enough to remember them, Mateen Cleaves and Morris Peterson and Jason Richardson, Mo Pete and Jay Rich. I think Jay Rich has already expressed his support for Ishbia's purchase of the Suns. We'll wait for Mo Pete and Mateen Cleaves to weigh in and see if they're down with it too. But Ishbia is he's reportedly purchasing the Suns as well as the Phoenix Mercury. It had always been, Sarver owned them both. So the sale was supposedly they were trying to sell to one entity and not have 2 owners share the same arena where the Mercury and the Suns both play. So the price tag of $4 billion is a little bit misleading for just like NBA valuation. It's like well over $3 billion for the NBA team, and you're getting, in addition, a WNBA team that certainly the future of the WNBA is bright, but I don't think you're buying an NBA team in and of itself for like $1 billion. It's so maybe $4 billion, not a way to talk about what the Suns price is, but north of $3 billion, no prob, Bob. This is meaningful for some Blazers reasons because reportedly the Blazers are eventually going to be sold. More on that in a moment. Real quick, what you need to know about Ishbia is like all billionaires are weirdos, and this dude has like a pretty serious feud with Cavs owner Dan Gilbert. They've both contributed like a boatload of money to Michigan State. They both work in the same mortgage world with Rocket Money is whatever it's called, Rocket Mortgage, that Dan Gilbert owns. And now they both own an NBA team. If you have unlimited money, you could really create quite the rivalry. Suns-Cavs, the new greatest rivalry in billionaire world. Transitioning to why this is meaningful for you, Blazer fan, other than just a funny billionaire stuff. Reportedly, at the beginning of the season, Phil Knight, founder of Nike, and along with his ownership group, were trying to purchase the Blazers for in the range of $2 billion and were rebuffed by Blazers ownership. The Allen estate eventually released a statement that said neither the Trailblazers nor the Seattle Seahawks were for sale, and only and folks asking can just wait, because the Allen estate plans to own both entities for a long time. And while they eventually will have to sell them due to what's in the will, there is no timeline for that to be sold. And it could be upwards of 10 years before they're sold. That seems like somewhat reactionary, but if it is, regardless of what the timeline looks like, the sale of the Suns for, let's call it $3 billion, that's a 50% increase. That's reason number one that you decline that $2 billion price tag for the Blazers. I think it is in the best interests of Portland's long-term franchise for the Allen estate to sell, just because I think, you want ownership that is going to spend lavishly. You want ownership that's going to say, like, invest in a G League team to make the Blazers on par with 28 other teams in the league. And interestingly enough, the Suns, the other team that doesn't have a G League team. But the Blazers have been reluctant to be a luxury tax team. Certainly, if they're more competitive, that changes the calculations of the luxury tax. They haven't been super competitive. You're less likely to pay the tax. But in the final stretch of Damian Lillard's prime, you want ownership that's willing to spend whatever it takes to absolutely go for it. And I don't know if this current ownership group will do that. There's not a lot that suggests they will. Maybe they will and they'll surprise me, but I think the Blazers are better off in the long term with new ownership. Whoever it's going to be is going to be like a billionaire with weirdo rivalry, maybe buying an NBA team to spur their fellow college alum or something like that. But so maybe not root for the billionaire class necessarily, because they're all strange, but it is the health of the Blazers franchise, I think, would be better served by new ownership. And the price, $2 billion, it's clearly not enough money for the Blazers. The other thing that this means, and I think this is significant, it's going to be hard for NBA ownership to cry poverty. The negotiation for a new CBA has been pushed back till February between the Players Union and the ownership group, or the Governors, Board of Governors. They're going to push back to February. They're continuing to try to negotiate and try to figure things out before the CBA, before the thing would have to get ratified, or before you'd have to say, okay, we're both opting out and we'll have to figure out a new one. You'd like to reach some negotiation. But I don't think the owners can cry poverty when you're selling the Phoenix Suns for $3+ billion, close to $4 billion. Whatever someone tried to buy the T-Wolves on layaway, whatever the T-Wolves sale ends up going for, certainly might be impacted by this price. That's going, if these teams in non-glamour markets like Phoenix and Minnesota, and the Jazz recently sold for a whole bunch of money, like in Salt Lake City. If non-glamour markets are selling for this much money, that means things like the Knicks and the Lakers are like a $10 billion asset. You can't cry poverty if you're sitting on $10 billion of assets. And if you can't cry poverty, and they will, because that's what billionaires do, well, then the super millionaires who represent your labor class are not going to let you get away with it. We're looking at perhaps some strife in the future. I think the Suns sale points to some strife, and it points to the Blazers price tag. If someone wants to purchase them, whether that be Phil Knight and at all, or another entity, we're talking $3 billion. Yesterday's price is not today's price, and today's price is $3 billion for an NBA team. Wow. Wow. The Milwaukee Bucks sold for $500 million not too long ago. And now we're at $3 billion. $3 billion. Well, I guess that's what these things cost nowadays. All right. Blazers played a basketball game last night. Damian Lillard became the Portland's all-time leading scorer, and then they lost. But there was someone who was in the arena who works for this podcast network. Rylan Stiles, the host of Locked on Thunder, was there. In the second segment, he's going to join the program, talk about what it was like to be in the arena, give you a little insight into seeing Damian Lillard and interacting with his family and the members of the Thunder franchise behind the scenes, and look ahead to Wednesday's game and how the Blazers can slow down Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the Thunder after they lit him up for a $123 in the first meeting. That's what we'll do in the second segment. But first, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient and accessible anywhere, and it's 100% online. I think the best way to think about therapy is like taking care of your car. You don't want to wait until your car breaks down to to try to address the issues. You want to do scheduled routine maintenance to make sure that thing is running well. And your brain, your mental health is the same way. That's why therapy can be useful for you, because you're going to do routine maintenance to make sure you are running smoothly, to make sure things in your life are on track, or at least if things are off track, that you are doing the work to make it easier on yourself. Therapy can help when you're having acute trauma, when you're having a major accident, to use the car analogy, but you don't have to wait for that acute trauma to pop up, because BetterHelp can be the solution you need. It's the world's largest therapy service that has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists. It's available 100% online, plus it's affordable. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist. It couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. That's betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. All right. The second segment, we're going to look back. We're going to look a little bit forward. Last night, the Blazers played a basketball game in Oklahoma City. It was supposed to be a historic night. And if you listen to this podcast, you probably know how it went down. Damian Lillard becomes the Blazers' all-time leading scorer. And then they lost at the buzzer because they couldn't handle Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the second half. He scored 24 of his 35 after halftime and gave the Blazers fits, got to the foul line, took 14 free throws, hit go-ahead free throws late in the game, and then a game winner as the buzzer sounded. It was supposed to be this historic moment, and it still was. It just didn't end the way the Blazers wanted. But to offer some perspective on kind of what it was like to be in the arena, I want to bring on host of Locked on Thunder, Rylan Stiles, to talk about the view from the inside and kind of what he saw, and then look ahead to the Wednesday matchup where the Blazers have a rematch against the Thunder right back there in Oklahoma City. Joining me now, host of Locked on Thunder, Rylan Stiles. Rylan, how you doing? Thanks for joining the program.
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
So you were in the building last night, and you got to be up close and personal for just a really fun basketball game, really entertaining basketball game, a historic night on the Blazers side. Before we kind of talk what happened, because it wasn't very good on the Blazers end in those final 30 seconds, but before we get into that, what was it like to be in the arena, like, and particularly in relation to Damian Lillard becoming the Blazers' all-time scoring champion?
Yeah, it was honestly awesome. It was a game that I've been talking about since it happened. Like the whole night, you could feel it. It's 21 points. Like you knew Dame was going to get there because he's Dame. And so you walk in the arena and Dame's out there warming up, and you're just like, I'm sitting on the court that Dame's warming up on. He's about to break this record that will probably never be broken around many franchises, not just Portland, because guys just don't stay around long enough to break those kind of records. So like this is a piece of NBA history that will likely never be touched again, or especially of course in Portland and everything. Like it was just so monumental to be there, watching him warm up, being there after the game with his family out there on the court, taking pictures of him. Like it was crazy to be in that moment with him and with the team and with this just entire sport, honestly. And I think that the fans were also very awesome with the appreciation. They gave Scott Brooks a standing ovation. They gave Jeremy Grant a standing ovation, two former Thunder people from the organization. And then when Dame got the record at the free throw line, the timeout happened. And in the arena, they announced that Dame had broken the record. And he immediately got a standing ovation from his own teammates, from the crowd as well. The Thunder saluted him as well on the other bench. Like, I feel like it was the rare time where everyone in real time realized how cool this was to be a part of and how amazing this was to see it kind of unfold. And then, of course, we got a heck of a basketball game, the best game in the league last night, and one of the best games of the season. Like the way that went down and the way that Shai got that game winner off of the Blazers just throwing the inbound to the third row. Like it was a crazy setup. It was a crazy game on a historic night. So it felt incredible to be a part of. I tweeted that out multiple times, about how thankful I was to be there. And I feel like it was the one time that history was really, resonating with people in real time.
Yeah, I mean, Dame had mentioned like, oh, I wish I had done this at home. I wish I had done this at home. But to do it there and to have a moment where, I was watching on my couch. But like the Blazers broadcast didn't go to timeout during that commercial because they knew it was going to be special, and they stayed in the arena, and his son walked down and kind of said, "Hey, Dad," like noting it was special. His whole family's there in OKC. Like it's really something. I think the Thunder are maybe the best franchise in the league at recognizing former folks. They really put on for their former Thunders, storm chasers, whatever you want to call them. So I'm not surprised
Thunder
Scott
legends,
Brooks. Yeah, I'm not surprised Scott Brooks and Jeremy Grant got shout outs there. That tracks with the times that I've been in the arena. They really put on for their people. Also, the Thunder kind of owe Damian Lillard a little tip of the cap, right? Like he put them in this direction. Like he blew it up so they got here. Does that resonate at all with the Thunder fan base that like Dame kind of on one, a bad couple weeks in 2019 put them on the path they're on now?
Yeah, if you go look at the Thunder subreddit right now, there's already a Photoshop of Shai's face on Dame's body waving off the Thunder from his game winner last night. And looking back on it, obviously, like the moment the shot went down, it hurt. But because of that shot, the Thunder were able to realize, hey, it's time to pivot. And since then, I mean, you got a historic call for Paul George. You can't do better than that. And since then, right. You had Russell Westbrook say, hey, I want to leave too. You didn't have to make that tough call to outcast your franchise guy. He made it for you. And since then, let's face it, I mean, Russell Westbrook has not played at the level that you would want him to on that contract. And so it worked out for everyone involved. Russ got to go to Houston and try it. And now he's in LA and everything. Paul George got to go where he wanted to go. And the Thunder got a heck of a head start on a rebuild where now they have a guy in Shai who can just start the rebuild as a top 15, top 12 guy in the NBA, however you want to situate him in that.
Don't do player rankings.
Yeah, no, we're not going to get into the nitty gritty of player rankings.
What he meant was, it was top tier. He meant top tier of players in the league.
Right, an upper echelon player, and then you draft Chet Holmgren, and you're still sitting on a mountain of draft picks while you have Chet Holmgren, while you drafted Jalen Williams, who was really good last night in the win for Oklahoma City, and you have an interesting Project Newsman Jang and Poku, and like you still have a mountain of draft picks and a ton of cap space as well to make trades or just simply sit on those draft picks and actually select them. So yeah, the Dame shot really set all of this in motion, and last night every Thunder fan was talking about how full circle it felt to have Shai hit the game winner on Dame and on Portland, in the sense of, it wasn't as big of a deal as bouncing you out of the playoffs, but it was a historic night that now Dame has to live with a loss in that night, but that really doesn't matter. I do want to say before we move on about Dame's family, they were all there and they were all fantastic. Dame was so nice. His family is so nice. Like whenever you walk past them in the hallways, they're always so happy and kind of welcoming and everything else. Very, very talkative, very friendly. Like I was so happy for him, and especially for the type of guy he is. Mark, before the game and after the game, talked about how everyone in the NBA walls, like they all appreciate how genuine and how much integrity that Dame has. And so Dame as a person and as a basketball icon deserved that moment. I was glad that he got it. Of course, he'd rather have it in Portland, but I was glad that the Thunder kind of stepped up and gave him the ovation he deserved as well.
Yeah, I will say like about Dame and his people, they seem like normal people. Sometimes you're around NBA people and their friends and family, and they do not seem like normal people. Dame's his mom is like a normal person. A handful of times I've talked to her, his wife is like a normal person. Like that's a weird thing to say about someone who's like 32 or whatever, but in NBA circles and the the $500 million he's made, not everyone is normal like that. Dame's people are normal. And I'm glad you got to experience them a little bit, because they're good folks. And they were all piled into OKC to see a special moment that went south. Quite frankly, for selfish podcast-based reasons, not great for the old Locked On Blazers podcast. Not great. We don't need to rehash it. If you missed the game, and both of us over on Rylan's podcast on Locked On Thunder and over on Locked On Blazers, we recapped the game. It's waiting there for you. What I want to ask is kind of looking forward. The Blazers gave up 24 points in the second half to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He lived at the free throw line. It's what he does. He's great at drawing fouls. One of the best players in the league at drawing fouls. What type of defenders have given him trouble this year? Like what is like the prototype for slowing him down?
Honestly, it's just throwing an abundance of length at him. Like it hasn't been a particular guy. Like Dylan Brooks has done good, but really it's been Memphis. Like that's given him trouble. Everywhere else, it's kind of been the same story of last night. Like, yeah, there's some nights where he's shooting 2 of 10 in the first half, right? But then in the second half, he catches fire and he's fine. The defensive strategy, though, that's really hurt him is whenever you just pack the paint with length and athletic ability to defend the shot without fouling. And if you can do that, which is hard to do, obviously, but if you can do that with limiting your fouls and throwing that length at him, the Thunder just do not have enough shooters right now to make you pay for it. And so if you can do that and he sprays it out to Muscala or he sprays it out to Aaron Wiggins and they just so happen to not have their best night shooting, and the Thunder offense is going to stall and things are going to go south. There is a possibility that you do that and he kicks it out to Isaiah Joe, and Isaiah Joe goes 3 for 6 from 3, and Muscala goes 2 for 4 from 3, and all of a sudden they hit a couple shots and it still works out for OKC. But the Thunder just need more shooting to help him not face that kind of defense. But that is the blueprint for slowing down Shai. It's just doing what Memphis does. Like if you can pack in there guys like Steven Adams, Jaren Jackson Jr. and Brandon Clark all at the same time, you're going to stop SGA at the rim. The problem is not a lot of teams have those three guys.
Yeah, and I think the Dillon Brooks, Jaren Jackson combo is the key, right? Because Dillon Brooks he's not very fast, but he's strong. He's like football player type. Like he's really physical. So he's going to get up in you and make it tough. And then from there, you have freaky Jaren Jackson Jr., who's one of the best shot blockers in the league at the rim. And if it's not Jaren, if you can space him out and get creative to get him out of the paint, Steven Adams is a giant person, and it just helps to have giant people. I feel like last night the Blazers really missed Yusuf Nurkic. I feel like they really missed him because his best skill is just rim deterrence. Like he's not a great shot blocker, but being in the way, he's a great rim deterrer. And on the other end, they could have just fed him in the post for some easy baskets because the Thunder are not very girthy. They got some size, but not a lot of thickness down there. They're not going to handle a 7-foot, 300-pounder, with a handful of post ups. I feel like the Blazers missed Nurk a little bit. I think they'll try Jeremy Grant on him more. The Blazers went with Josh Hart and they went with Justice Winslow, particularly late, to put strength on him because that seems, it's like, okay, he doesn't shoot threes. So we want him to, he's going to try to get to the mid-range, going to try to get to the cup. Let's put strength on him. It didn't work. Like they couldn't handle him in the second half. Couldn't keep him off the line. Couldn't keep him out of the paint. Couldn't keep him out of that little 14-foot range where he is good. And at the end of the game, they should have double teamed him and they didn't. Well, what are you going to do? Sometimes it's like that. One more thing. Do you like these little 2-game sets? Do you like playing the same opponent twice? Does that, as an NBA fan, not as a media member, as a fan, does this like you just watch the Thunder win? Are you excited to watch them play the same team on Wednesday?
So I think that it's two different perspectives, right? I think that for me, I like it for who I'm a fan of, like the Thunder get a chance to kind of simulate what a playoff series would be like, because we're going to see tomorrow on Wednesday tonight, whenever the Blazers, as you mentioned, they could throw, if they get, Jurkic back, then you put Grant on Shai and then have Grant funnel Shai into the paint deterrent down there, as you call them. Then that changes the entire complexity of how Shai's going to have to play that game tomorrow compared to how he played it Monday. And the Blazers can get away with that because, as you mentioned, yeah, you're going to take Grant off the 4, but the Thunder's 4 is only 6'7", so your 3 or 2 can slide down there and defend him very well. And so the Thunder are going to get a taste of what it's like game to game whenever you're playing teams 4 straight times, 5 straight times in the playoffs, and how they're going to have to take the counterpunch. They won the game Monday. That's great. But there's going to be another layer Wednesday that you have to figure out. Now, for Portland, for the Clippers, for teams that are for sure going to be in the playoffs, I would not like it if my team was in that area. For example, the Thunder played the Clippers early this year. The 2 times the Clippers are going to come to OKC this year, they didn't have Paul George for one. They didn't have Kawhi for either. The Thunder capitalized, beat them twice. That's 2 losses that the Clippers wouldn't otherwise have, just due to the fact that at that moment, they didn't have their guys. And so that really hurts you in the standings like the Western Conference is right now. But for the Thunder, there is a huge benefit, much less the travel, but the huge benefit being what I mentioned about the strategies and like understanding, hey, game to game in the NBA, we're not going to, it's easier to kind of practice what you preach, and for Mark to get his message across of, hey, this is real life, like this is tangible things I'm telling you. It's harder to realize that whenever you play once in October and once in February. It's harder to carry over those lessons. The lessons carry over so much better for a young team Monday to Wednesday than October to February.
Absolutely. Anecdotally, I think it's hard to win 2 of these. The Blazers swept the T-Wolves in a home series. They also split with the Suns when the Blazers didn't have Damian Lillard and Anthony Simons. They won a game in Phoenix. Like it's just hard to beat a team twice. The next night after that, shorthanded Blazer team lost by 200,000 points against the Suns. I think it was only 20 in the box score, but it was not a competitive basketball game for any of it. For the sake of the Blazers and listenership to this podcast, come on, Portland, don't lose twice to OKC. Don't do it. With all due respect to Thunder fans, they're used to losing podcasts. They can handle it. They got a much wider view than what we're doing in Portland. Rylan, thanks so much for joining the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your sports action. Whatever that sports action is, you're going to find it on the number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to the NBA to the NHL. They've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those on BetOnline as well. Like I said, the fastest and easiest way to get all of your sports betting info. So head on over to that website today. You can go there on the desktop or even use your mobile device. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked on Blazers, part of Locked on Podcast Network. Oops, that's how we do the intro. But yeah, third segment, we made it back. I'm in intro mode, baby. What I want to do to close the show, thanks for Rylan for hopping on the second segment. What I want to do to close the show is Western Conference tiers. We used to do these more often, and quite frankly, the Western Conference has been so jumbled that I have avoided doing this, because it would have been like, Western Conference tier, these 11 teams all in the same tier. I think I've got it spaced out a little bit, where I think there's some stratification between the teams. I've got 6 tiers here in the West. We're going to count all 15 teams from worst to best. This is sort of my equivalent of a power rankings, but I think the difference in saying like between sort of like 1 and 3 is kind of like, yeah, these teams are about in the same area. And so I think a tier to me makes more sense for how I think about them. So let's run through it. All 15 teams in the West. The 6th tier, the bottom tier, are teams that are bad. That's the Spurs and the Rockets. 2 young teams that are not particularly interested in winning in the near term. The Rockets run maybe the worst offense in the league. It is chaotic, and a lot of times they just don't. They're just playing pickup basketball, it looks like. When they run 2-man stuff with Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün, they're pretty good. When they do anything else, it's a nightmare. They're bad. And they're bad on purpose, and they're super young. They've got a lot of good young parts. The future is bright. The present is dim. The Spurs, they're kind of, they've got some vets that contribute, like Josh Richardson and Doug McDermott and Jakob Poeltl, of course. Then they've got these young vets, Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson, that are useful. And then they've got a bunch of kind of just filler youngsters that are probably not part of the long-term future beyond Jeremy Sohan. The Spurs are going to accomplish their goal of being one of the truly bad teams this year. It took them a while to commit to rebuilding. They've committed to it. They're bad. That's your bottom tier. In the 5th tier, we've got teams with an all-star that are not good. That's the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Los Angeles Lakers. Lakers would have been up a tier, but with Anthony Davis out for at least a month and likely a lot longer, this is where they are. They've got an all-star in LeBron James, who is, after a slow shooting start to the season, still an excellent NBA player in his 20th NBA season. Hard to believe, but it's real. He's still really good. Their roster just stinks outside of that. Like it's a mess. They got too many point guards, not enough wings. They're not good. But they do have LeBron James, and they're on TV a lot. Oklahoma City Thunder, super young and are knocked up a tier because of how good Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is. He's a superstar. I think he'll make an all-star team for the first time this year. He's just an excellent basketball player. One of the best players in the league, hidden in Oklahoma City. That's why they're in this 5th tier. In the 4th tier, I've got 2 more teams. These are the walking wounded. That's the Golden State Warriors, who are without Steph Curry for a few weeks as he deals with a shoulder injury, and the Timberwolves, who are without Karl-Anthony Towns till deep into the new year. I think the Wolves are worse than the Warriors, but the Warriors' record hasn't gotten right, and they've pretty much relied on Steph Curry, and without Steph, I don't see them making a big climb in the standings. He's built to be the engine of that team, and like Draymond's way worse without Steph and all of those things. Like he makes the complementary parts better. He makes everything tick. That's why the 4th tier is Warriors and Wolves alone. The 3rd tier is your most crowded tier. The team most likely to slip out of the 3rd tier into the 4th is the Dallas Mavericks, just because they're dealing with some health stuff. Maxi Kleber is having hamstring surgery. He's going to miss a long time, and perhaps done for the season, a long time. That's a bummer. He's a really good defender, and when he's making shots, a useful floor spacer, an important part of their playoff lineups for sure. They will miss Kleber. He can help. He does help them. And Dorian Finney-Smith apparently has a groin injury that's going to be out for a little while, depending on how long DFS is out. That's 2 of their best role players, 2 of their key role players. The secret to the Mavs sauce is that Luka Doncic is the sun, and they've got some useful parts rotating around the sun. And part of that was the versatility that Kleba and Dorian Finney-Smith provided, particularly DFS. Their best defender, a really good offensive rebounder, just a good basketball player, and they'll miss him. The Mavs are the bottom of the third tier. The rest of the tier is the Jazz, Kings, Clippers, and Blazers. I think the Clippers, while the Mavs are the team most likely to fall out, the Clippers are the team most likely to climb above this tier. They're good when their good players play. It's a weird phenomenon. But you can't count on Kawhi Leonard playing basketball games. You really can't count on Paul George playing a ton of basketball games. They've had a lot of injury issues in a believable way for a team which their two best players have had availability issues. Kawhi more than any other star in the league. Like, will he play each night? In a league where teams are obsessing over load management, Kawhi Leonard's probably the only star in the league that really cares about load management in a meaningful way. His availability makes the Clippers, just a huge question mark. And beyond that, they don't have enough dudes who can dribble to the rim. They could use other guys who could dribble from the three-point line to the rim. They got a lot of dudes who can shoot threes, not a lot of dudes who can get to the rim. When they're healthy and whole, they're a very good basketball team that is, could beat anyone in the league. They're just not healthy and whole enough. In that middle tier, you've got the Jazz, Kings, and Blazers. Three good offensive teams that are pretty bad on defense. I think the Kings and the Jazz are a surprise to me. I think maybe in other parts of the world, the Blazers are a surprise to other teams with their success so far this season. All three of these teams look like they could very comfortably make the playoffs and avoid the play-in. But the West is tough, and one of these teams is very likely to end up in the play-in just with how the math works. That's your tier 3, Blazers, Clippers, Kings, Jazz, and Mavericks. And tier 2 by themselves are, I don't know what to do with them. It's the Pelicans. They profile statistically as an elite basketball team. They have the statistical profile of a team that could win a championship. That's what their top tier offense, top tier defense suggests. That is, win a championship level good. But when I watch them play, they are missing a little bit of half-court juice. They just do not. When they play against really good teams and they get into crunch time, they're missing half-court juice. That half-court scoring ability is on the bench in Brandon Ingram. When he gets back from a toe injury, they're a different basketball team. They also might take a step back on defense, playing more him and less Najee Marshall and Herb minutes. Herb Jones and Najee Marshall, really fun wing tandem. Brandon Ingram, incredible offensive player, but you lose some of that wing tenacity, defensive tenacity on the wings. Najee Marshall, a longtime favorite of this podcast, he's been hooping this year, and he helps. They are alone in that second tier. And then your top tier, Grizzlies, Nuggets, and Suns. The Suns have, they had a stretch where Chris Paul was out, and then Devin Booker was out, and then Devin Booker playing by himself kind of propped up the Suns for a little bit. He missed a couple games. He came back, and without CP back, they weren't very good. Then CP came back, and they were still bad because Chris Paul, who's 37 years old, looks like a 37-year-old basketball player. Last couple nights, Chris Paul has looked good again, particularly the last Suns game. He looked like the dude who at age 36 last year was the engine of a very, very, very good offense. Who knows how consistent that could be, but if their statistical profile suggests that they're one of the very good teams, and if, I think a lot of it is just CP's consistency. If Chris Paul is a good offensive player, they're going to be good. If he heads in the other direction, Father Time remains undefeated, then they're likely to slip out of this tier. The top tier are the Nuggets, who are an elite offense and a terrible defense, but Nikola Jokic is just so darn good. He can prop you up. The Nuggets are second in defense and second in offense, 27th in defense as I'm recording this episode. This is before the game start on Tuesday. You're listening to Wednesday, December 21st show. You probably can't win a championship with one of the 5 worst defenses in the league. In fact, you can't win a championship with one of the 5 worst defenses in the league. So picking the Nuggets to be a title favorite over a team like Phoenix or a team like New Orleans that, profile like a team that could win a title is probably foolish. But right now, during the regular season, with the way the offense can be, and if Jamal Murray gets more healthy, and if they ever get Michael Porter Jr. back, again, health questions for guys who've had health issues. If they ever get that rolling, I think they can be even better on offense. And during the regular season, that makes you a juggernaut. It's a whole different conversation when we get to the playoffs. Grizzlies profile as a championship quality team. They're the second best record in the NBA last year. Jaren Jackson Jr. is back and healthy and awesome. Ja Morant is very good. They've got just intriguing young parts. They add David Roddy's out of the late first round and Santi Aldamas to the starting lineup off the deep bench last year. And it's like, oh, these dudes are totally competent and fine. If they've been doing all this without Desmond Bane in the lineup, when he gets back, that's another very, very good basketball player on both ends of the court. That really helps. The Grizzlies might be if there was a tier by themselves, that's where they'll be. Memphis and Denver play tonight. So by the time you're listening to this, someone will have won that game, and maybe these tiers will sound a little bit foolish. But for me right now, your top tier are Grizzlies, Nuggets, Suns. Your second tier, Pelicans. Your third tier, Blazers, Clippers, Kings, Jazz, and Mavs. And the fourth tier, your Warriors and Wolves. 5 is Wolves. 5 is Lakers and Thunder, and 6 Spurs and Rockets. Those are your Western Conference tiers. We'll do this again in the future. I think we're getting some stratification as we get a little bit deeper into the season. Blazers play the Oklahoma City Thunder on Wednesday. Damian Lillard added to the injury report. He's listed as probable with a wrist injury. Casey Holdahl of Trailblazers.com reports that Dame's wrist was looked at after the game, a shooting wrist, but probable is a good sign. Yusuf Nurkic, who missed Monday's game, who was listed as questionable, and then he was off the injury report, then questionable, then out. He's back to questionable heading into Wednesday's game. He's been dealing with a calf injury. Gary Payton, not back. I don't think he's coming back on this road trip. But if Nurk plays, that's a game changer for the Blazers. Obviously, the availability of Damian Lillard will matter. But Thursday show, we will recap that game at OKC. Friday show, we'll look ahead to the weekend and beyond for the Blazers. 5 days a week, available wherever you get podcasts. It's also on YouTube. Tell your friends about the show and make it your first listen every day. That way you and your pals will have something to talk about by the time you get to lunch. How about you make your second listen Locked On Sports Today, 22-minute program covering all the major stories across all the major sports leagues here in North America. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.